everybody. This is Paul Herman, the Prince of Motivation and host of Zaka Presents My Journey. We're creating this vulnerable and positive platform where you get inspired and motivated from different leaders from our community. Today, our guest is Gustavo Netto, Vice President of Technology Strategy, Innovation, and Delivery at Royal Caribbean. Welcome to the show, Gustavo.
Thanks so much for having me here, Paul.
It's a pleasure to have you on. You got a long title right there, so I know it comes with a lot of hardship, in which we're going to be obviously speaking about a little bit more when we dive more into these questions. But before we get deep into this Royal Caribbean and all the other avenues you have ventured off into, if possible, give us a little bit of an understanding of your background, your cultural background, and where you grew up.
Sure. I was born in Brazil and proudly raised in Brazil, São Paulo. When I was 12 years old, I had an experience to go abroad and play soccer in Chile for a summer that really changed my life in terms of looking at the globe outside of the bubble which I was born. When I was 20 years old, I moved to the United States, to New York specifically. And then in my journey for the past 25 years in the US, I also had opportunities to go to China, I lived a little bit for about a year in the UK. So I say like nowadays, I feel like I'm a global citizen. And my background from a culture standpoint, my family heritage is Italian, Portuguese, born in Brazil. And I have a passion for culture. So I'm really excited about this conversation that you guys are leading around culture and the influence it has on us. So thanks for having me on the show.
No, the pleasure's all ours. Now, I want to kind of dive into a little bit of your childhood. Talk to us about that, right? Growing up, you said you came to the United States when you were 20, but you had an opportunity to travel at a younger age to Chile due to soccer,
Mhm.
um, which I know you from previous years, how good you were on that field. But talk to us, your childhood, any fondest memory growing up as a child?
Yeah, my mom refers to me as the hyper Gustavo, as the hyperactive child. The way we say when I go back home is when I look at what's going on now, my generation was the last generation to play out on the streets. So I grew up playing soccer on the streets, barefooted. Um, had an amazing childhood, great supporting parents that make sure that I focus on education, getting my education also gave me a lot of independence. Um, by my childhood memories are nothing but lots of being outside playing, especially soccer, which has been my passion for my entire life. And ups and downs as far as figuring out life, but trying to pursue an education when I was back home. And then when I was 20 years old, I had the opportunity, and I was giving my blessing parents to allow me to travel outside of the country on my own, and came to the United States. So. Nothing but great memories of a childhood that had divorced parents. So we can talk about that. But because I always felt in between the parents, and that's probably a little bit of how I always was seeking independence.
Mm-hmm.
But I only realized that later in life. But those are the memories I have. Great, great friends. Brazilians are known for surround themselves with lots of people and friends, and I was no different. And my passion for computers started when I was 12 as well. So always had a kind of computer, the geek side of me, and then the kind of the athlete side of me, always talking to each other. But these are the kind of main memories I have. But if you have questions, specific areas, I'll be happy to dive in deeper.
Now, a question I'm definitely going to dive into because it's something I would like to know more of the soccer. How did this come about? Like, I know obviously Brazil is known for a lot of great things, but was there someone in the family? Was it something that you just, got a soccer ball one day and you were like, hey, look, the last generation, like you said, to play soccer in the streets. How did that come about? That love and
Yeah, I
passion.
mean, speaking of culture, right? Brazilian culture is immersive into the soccer culture, right, in itself. So we got exposed to the sport growing up, and I started really young. I don't even remember, like maybe 4 or 5 years old. I played my first tournament when I was 7, and the passion came from by looking at play, seeing my dad play. He played professionally for a second division team, and he's so passionate about the sport that he would play during the week. I'll go and we'll either watch him and then play with the kids. And this girl grew on me. It wasn't given, it wasn't forced. It was something that I observed. I love it. And I felt that I always have a way of developing my own skills. And I was blessed with great coaching as well. So the early divisions back home was very foundational to develop techniques
Mhm.
that I carry throughout my life, and now I'm passing on to my kids. So soccer has been part of my life and going to come from my dad, and now passing on to the generations to come.
Okay, they're not in the street doing it now.
I'm sorry.
I said they're
If
not in the streets doing it.
I wish there were. I wish there were, and
I know, right? That was the good
I
old
try to,
days.
I try to do this, here in Florida with my kids, and when we go back home. But you don't see as often. I wish there were, but there's lots of great parks here to play. To be honest,
Okay. Okay. With
yeah,
shots at grass, not the concrete. I
absolutely.
remember those days,
I
two
wish
hand touch
I
and
wish I had that growing up. So
yeah, that was a whole different ball game. So talk to us now. You coming to New York, right? You're in your 20s, right?
yeah,
You're 20
I was
exactly.
exactly. I had just turned 20. Yes.
Just turned 20. And I know that it probably was a language barrier as well too along that way, right?
There was, which is one of the reasons I wanted to come, was to learn English. I landed in New York City by myself, and I didn't even know how to take a taxi to Manhattan, to be honest. And my intent was to go to an English school, learn the language. My initial intent is to stay for 6 months, learn as much as I could. Fairly quickly, I learned that you don't learn a new language in 6 months. So I had
Mhm.
to extend my stay a little longer. And then I think the natural challenges of an immigrant, right? Which is you don't know anybody, you don't know the language, you got to figure it out. But to me, it's also something that I was passionate about. I've been, always back to the way my mom described me as a child. I was always the curious child, and I've always embraced the unknown. I think from the experience that I mentioned earlier in Chile, I had the experience to be independent, go to a culture, not knowing the language, not knowing anybody. And I felt, 8 years later, I had the same opportunity, but a little bit more mature then, although I wasn't as mature, but more mature than I was when I was in Chile. So I've always embraced the unknown and being in situations that I've just kind of figured things out. So that was also something that has driven me to come to the United States.
And that's something I'm glad you mentioned that because a lot of the thought leaders that came on say the same words, had to just figure it out. I think that's something to say about the immigrant culture.
Yeah,
Um, and like this just whether it be first, second, or first or second generation immigrants, just that mindset of being like, look, we got to figure it out. There's no turning
yeah,
back, right? It's not like there's 20 different options. This is one option, right? And to immerse yourself in an environment where you don't even speak the language, right?
right.
Don't know anybody, like just think of it like in corporate terms right now currently, right? You get to a new job, you walk into the office, you're the new kid on the block. You already feel a little bit like, oh my gosh, like mind you, you speak the language, you probably went to school, the same schools that these people probably went to, right? You probably have live in the same area, right? But to come to a different place so far off from where you are, the culture, the temperature, the climate, right? Let alone is different. And then I assume people weren't playing soccer like that on a
That's
regular.
right.
Right. So what was like that first job? Like how did you at the age of 20, I'm assuming there's gonna be some type of work that needs to be done. How was
Yeah, I
that?
mean, I came literally with, I think I had like $3,000 in my pocket. I had already prepaid 2 months of my education, but I knew, one thing I know for a fact, because I was a city boy. I came from São Paulo, which is a city with over 20 million people. So I went from one concrete jungle to another. So
Yes.
I knew what to expect in New York, and similar to São Paulo, I mean, you've got to figure things out, and if you're gonna be on your own, you got to work, right? So my first mission was how do I quickly get a job, and I don't care what it was, and I had to pay two things. I had to pay for my school, for my education, for the English center, and I had to pay for my rent. And I knew living in Manhattan was expensive then, more expensive now probably.
Oh, without a doubt.
So I quickly start networking, and someone that I met, um, that was my roommate at the time. He got me a position as a busboy for a restaurant on the Lower East Side in Manhattan. So that was my first job. And then it was a restaurant, a Ukrainian restaurant called Zaka on the corner. It's still there, actually. They're on the corner of First and Ninth, if I'm not mistaken. And but they only would give me one or two shifts, so I was kind of the reserves in the busboy list. So they would call me, man, maybe this week they would give me 1 day, next week they would give me 2 days. I'm like, this is not enough. So then walk around the block, and then a block later, I found um, a sign on the wall, like by the door, for a French restaurant, and they were hiring dishwashers. And I said, "What the hell? I'll take that. $6 an hour. I can deal with that." But that gave me more consistency. So I worked as a bus boy every day from 4 to 11, and I would go to school in the morning. And days in, days off. Sometimes I would take 1 or 2 days at the other place. And then I mean, this goes on for about 5 years, was between education and jobs. And that's what I realized, there's a difference between having jobs and building a career. I was building my career, but I knew that the jobs that I had were my building blocks to support myself. So I always enjoy it, to be honest. I mean, so I went from restaurants to cater waiter, ice cream store manager for a Jewish family that was building up a store called Smoochies on 23rd, but they quickly start opening other stores, so they need a manager to help them open up. And then I worked for a Italian place called Taraluce in Bino on 14 and 2nd. And then I worked for a Greek restaurant on 72nd and 3rd. So all this job, if I put it all together and when I look back, is they all gave me the opportunity to interact with customers, except for the dishwasher. But I got
Right, you were in the
promoted to be
back.
a busboy at some point.
Yep,
Uh,
yep.
but it was always the opportunity to go interact with people, practice my English skills,
English. Yep, yep, yep. I can see
and
that.
uh, and then just getting myself out there. I mean, I was never a shy person to I'd be afraid of talking to people, but that's what got me going. And then I knew that's something else that's always going to come and happen. And that's what I'm so blessed and feel thankful. And now, as a proud American, that when we say this is the land of opportunity, is the opportunities are there, but if you don't go out and get them,
Yeah.
then you miss out. So
That was a lot of restaurant business. And I know that's very fast paced. The customer service has to be on point because you're dealing with New Yorkers coming in, coming
yeah.
out, quick. I need this now, kind of thing. So I'm assuming that has helped you with your leadership skills, like presently today.
Yes, absolutely. It's first of all, when you're learning a new language, you need to learn how to listen more than you talk. And back home, I remember growing up, I was a talker, right? I talked a lot. But I have to quickly understand that I need to listen more and have more empathy for what people are trying to do or how they're feeling at the time. If you get someone that's angry at the table, uh, you need to have empathy for the situation, not take anything personally. So that gave me a lot of skills to be a great observer and react and connect with people in various situations. So absolutely, those are skills. Between that and soccer, operating as a team is this is kind of how I develop my kind of own way of leading, building teams, getting
Mm,
things done as a group, and I take everything to heart to this day.
mm. Now I can see that the mixture of the two, being on a team, understanding how to work with a team, but also being in a restaurant business where it's fast paced customer service. There's a lot of life lessons, life skills, skill sets that are being developed, and obviously has transitioned into various different high position roles that you've been in. So be, before we get dive into those roles or those larger companies that you work for, I when leaving Brazil, was there like a thought process at the age of 20 of something that you wanted to be? I know you said you were into the the computer stuff, the IT stuff a little
Yeah.
bit, and then obviously you had the soccer thing going on. But like, was there like a role model or something that you said, this is what I want to be when I come to America, the land of opportunity?
I mean, my role model has always been my dad, right? My dad is actually also to this day he works and he's in the computer industry for 40 years plus. So he gave me my first computer, and he's the one that first kicked the soccer ball with to me and with me. So he's been my role model. But I think to me, when I think back, I have two things in mind. One is I was working in Brazil. I was going to my university first year. I had just completed my first year. And I knew if I didn't learn English then, I'll be out of the global economy. And there's a lot of talks back then about globalization and everything's happening around the world, and English is the global language. So I didn't want to miss that. I said, in order to grow in my career, regardless what I'm doing, I need to learn English. So that's mission number one. Mission number two, which is more of a dream, I always wanted to be a soccer player, but at age 20, I said, maybe there's a dream that I missed the boat and I didn't make it, right? So I kind of put that aside. So when I came in, the first 6 months, I said, if I can only get an internship and work in an American company and be able to learn new skills and practice English at the work environment, it's a win for me. So job done. That's what I had as a vision, not realizing there's just much more behind the scenes as to be very honest. And I think that's kind of when you put yourself a little bit vulnerable. Because I had divorced parents. I realized this later in life, probably when I was 30, where I've never liked to be in situations with my mom and dad or saying, well, I need to pay for my university, right? I don't have the full funding, or I need money for this. And growing up, I always felt in between them. And I never liked to be in the situation. So I think
Mm,
the reason why I was always seeking to be independent, especially financially independent, was because I didn't like to be in that situation. And I realized later that that was just actually driving my motivation.
yeah,
But then once I'm here, like I don't have them anymore. I don't need to ask them for anything. Uh, and I don't need to depend or even report to anybody what I'm doing, which is that independence comes about. But at the same time, you're like, okay, but I don't have them and I don't have anybody. That's when you feel lonely and you go through, those that have come by themselves. When you spend a lot of time with yourself, that's when you build a lot of self-awareness. And that to
yeah.
me, and what I learned later in life, also through leadership training, that's what leadership is born, is being self-aware. So all of these gave me a lot of a great foundation at an early age to later realize why I was taking the actions I was taking, the decisions I was making, and my motivation. But I think to answer your question more precisely, that was my vision coming in, and then I start believing in creating bigger visions
Mm.
and creating bigger goals and achieving those goals.
So when you talk about bigger visions, I mean, in the beginning, you were definitely in survival mode. You talked about, working at one job, going around the corner to the next, going to school in the morning, afternoon, and then pivoting to different restaurant businesses within the local area. But like, when did you? What was like the moment in time when you were like, this is it. I can't do this. I mean, you said 5 years you were doing it, right? So something happened in the fifth year or going into the sixth year where you were like, I did it for 5 years. What made you change and say, I want to go into more of a career versus a job, and work on that personal life?
That's a great question, Paul. I don't think it was one thing, it was a series of decisions throughout the journey, especially at the early stages. And I love what you said when you get here, you're in survivor mode. I'd like to define like an immigrant journey into three stages. One is the first stage is survivor mode. The first years you're just trying to survive, eat, pay your bills, get yourself settled. Then you go into the second stage, to me, is the growth opportunities, right? The growth stage. Now that you settle, can I grow myself personally? Can I grow myself professionally? And just growth mode. And I think the third stage is I call it abundance, But to me, abundance is how can we now contribute back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Help
True.
those that are in the beginning of the journey, or even create abundance of for those around you. Um, and then back to your question, I don't think it was one decision. It was the micro decisions. Some people say that we make 50,000 decisions every day from the moment we wake up to the time we go to bed. It was decisions for do I come to New York? Do I go to London? Because that was the first decision I had to make. Once I arrive, do I work in a restaurant? Do I go into construction?
Okay.
Then I was invited to go and do moving furniture, which I did a couple times and couldn't handle it. So it was micro decisions, but I think one consistent decision I've always made that really always helped, and I thank my mom for that because she's a retired teacher. It was always for the first 5 years, every money I made was to buying books, is to study, to pay for my education, and invest in me, in my
Mm-hmm.
education, my
That's
knowledge.
the biggest investment right there.
So I think it was those multiple decisions that, again, I was very fortunate to be able to just have the time for myself, to be somewhat selfish to myself, because I was investing in me and nobody else, right? I was just responsible for myself. Um, and then in that process, learning that, I'll be in survivor mode for a while, but I knew that wasn't going to last long, because my first micro vision was, as long as I can get an education, and as long as I can continue to build my skills, opportunities kept on coming, right? I always felt like always growing no matter what. If you go from a dishwasher and in 3 months you get promoted to a busboy, for me that was growth.
Yeah.
Then you get another gig to go and become a bartender at a catering company. Then you become a waiter in a different restaurant, a little more classy, right? So those to me were always stepping stones, but I knew I wasn't going to be in the restaurant business because that was not what I was meant to do with my career. My career I had in my mind, it was going to be in tech. I knew that. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know how to get there, but I knew it was going to be in tech.
And that's something because you felt that at a young age. You had that connection through tech. But
Yeah,
you kept on.
it was like a passion, man. It was kind of the first love with
Okay.
programming back in early ages, and then the late 90s, the internet boomed, so I became a graphic designer, web programmer. So it's you now bring things to life. I was more on the creative side. So I always enjoy kind of the people side of things, like understanding what people need,
Yep. Yep. Yep.
and then building things. I'm a builder of
Mhm.
technology.
So talk about building, right? You're talking about building your career, right? You went from the restaurant business. You got a couple of things that happened in your life that made you say, you know what, I got to leave out of this and I have to work on my career. Let's talk about GE. You have IBM. You have Royal Caribbean. You have some large corporations, not just like some small rinky dinks. You got some large corporations where you have held some strong leadership positions. Do you feel like every opportunity or every position you were in helped like lead you to where you are currently today in regards to like your leadership skills?
Absolutely, and it's something I was taught on leadership school, is that you can't be a chef if you don't know how to cook, right? And you have to cook enough, learn it, and when you're ready to be a chef, you be a chef. So one thing, I didn't want to skip steps, but at a young age, you don't know what the steps are, right? So before I got to GE, when I was still in New York, I was probably here for about 4 years. 4 years. It was a transition. So the need I saw, restaurants. So before Google came about, the restaurants didn't have websites, and I had the skills to build websites. So I offered for the owner for the French restaurant I work for, can I build your website for free? And he said, absolutely, right? So I built this beautiful website, took pictures, I did everything myself, and he loved it. And he said, how much can I pay you? And I said, I don't even know how much to charge. He's like, how about this? How about I give you 6 months of free food? You can come here anytime and eat, even your days
Mm,
off. I'm
Mm,
like, that sounds like a good deal. So then I build a bit, like if I think back, like if I were to describe now, I didn't describe then, I build a niche business building restaurant websites for restaurants in Manhattan. So in 6 months, I probably built 10 websites, right? I went one by one, knocking the doors. Hey, I built the website for the guys next door. Can I build yours? Absolutely. And then I started charging $500, $1,000. And I kept on testing. And then I had a mentor, a guy that finally become officially my first mentor in the US. He said, dude, you can start a lot more money. You can charge 2,500. You can charge
yeah.
3,000. And that's kind of my foundation around business to say, how do I go from being a technical person building things to now being a sales guy, developing the invoices, charging them, right? Feeling comfortable with money, and then eventually building a small team. So I hire a couple guys that I knew in Brazil. There's a guy from China that went to school with me, and then I had a couple guys in Mexico. In 2 years, I was leading a small team of about 8 people and building multiple projects in that space. So that was my transition into doing what I loved and then start making money. But I felt that it was a challenge to really scale. I didn't know how to scale a business. So I was scared of now if I fail, I don't have money to pay for my school. And at that time, I had decided to go and pursue a college education in my associate degree in New York. So it took 2 years for that. So it was a transition, and then I think that has the history where I um, I did a bunch of internships. So I did internship at JetBlue. I did internship at a company in Greenwich, Connecticut. So we was
Yeah.
taking the small steps to build my resume. So by the time I got to interviews with GE for the leadership program, I was ahead of my so-called competitors of people my age at that time.
I like how you're highlighting something very important. I want the listeners to really catch on to the fact that you moved around. I feel like in previous stories when talking to thought leaders, they had mentioned the same thing, how nervous they were just to move. Like it was like clear to them, like you got a job, just keep your head down, keep working hard, and that's it. But you took the opportunity to kind of still keep your head down and work hard, but move around to different things, and at the same time pick up different skill sets, which in turn helped you to get certain places. You know, the fear is a real thing, and I'm glad you kind of bring it up a little bit because it's important that we address that. You know, as you know, that's one of the biggest fears. Any first or second generation immigrant probably is in the forefront. Fear of not fitting in, fear of not speaking the language, fear of failure, right? Fear that you got to go back home and tell your family members that it didn't work out. So there's a level of pressure that's on you, right? And that could cause to different types of things. And you mentioned about being alone, that loneliness, you know, that leads to anxiety, it leads to depression, and it could lead to other negative influences that could throw you off. How did you stay positive in these dark moments?
It's interesting you say that. What I say is number one, as an immigrant and when you're on your own, it's like you don't have time for that. So to me, to stay positive, and there are times that I didn't know what depression was, and maybe I was getting depressed, but I shook it up and go for a run. So I was finding triggers in me whenever I felt sorry about myself. Either I would pick up the phone and call my mom or call my family and try to call friends. At the time, it's kind of expensive to call people. So we kind of you're on your own. We didn't have the easy of just pulling up the phone and via WhatsApp calling somebody. So I found triggers, either go to the library. I used to spend a lot of time in Barnes and Nobles going through books, or I would go and play soccer at the park, or I have roller skates and I'll go down Fifth Avenue on my roller skates. So I always find to be active. So I found my triggers not to fall into depression and then not building anxiety, because at the end of the day, anxiety is about you trying to anticipate the future. In depression, questioning the past. So how do you live the moment and appreciate what I was doing then, knowing that I was building the future? So that was my mindset. And then were the times that you don't feel like waking up or going to school, and you don't have
Mm,
anyone to push you, right? You don't have, the accountability comes from you. And that's kind of what I appreciate about us immigrants, that sometimes you just got to shake it off and move forward.
Hmm. You definitely shook it off a lot of times because the resume shows like no matter obviously we're talking about those struggles, but anyone staring in it and reading it on your resume or your bio, they would see all these wonderful accolades and the leadership positions you've held at these companies. But I'm glad that you're touching base on this. This is a real life thing that and I think other thought leaders, when they talked about, like, for example, depression, they were like, we didn't even know what it was. We just kept moving, right? It was a headache. That's what it was. Drink some tea and get over
I'll
it.
tell a quick story though, right? I had depression once, as far as I know. And you said something interesting also, right? So the pattern that you see in these leaders and the immigrants is how you're moving. To me, change is growth. You can only grow through change, right? Whether you change companies, you change departments, you change the scope of your work, you can only grow if you're changing for something else. And I feel like people look for, and you always hear thought leaders saying, go do something that you're uncomfortable with. Go outside of your comfort zone. And a lot of people don't understand what it is, but all it is change. Look for change, embrace change. And I think back to what I said at the beginning of this conversation, for some reason, I was wired, and I don't know what that comes from the early ages, that my parents look back and say, you're always looking for change. You couldn't sit still. You always like, now I probably be labeled ADHD. I don't know what it was, right? Or what it is, but I'm always looking for change. Uh, the longevity of these companies, for example, 10 years at GE, 8 years at IBM, I held 9 roles in 10 years at GE, right? Including
Mm,
4 within 2 years as part of the leadership program, because the company encouraged that. And what I learned is that it's not about changing for changing's sake. Is you understanding that you are in a role for a mission to build something bigger than yourself, to develop the skills that you need. You own your career. And then when the time comes, you're ready for something else. So instead of blaming the company to say, I need to be recognized for my effort, is you being assertive and proactive to say, I came into this role with just this job description. I've delivered this past 18 months everything that I was assigned to deliver. I built some more. I built something bigger than myself. I'm ready to transition to somebody else, and I'm ready to move on to the next thing. And the company appreciated that. So that's how I believe, and when I talk to other leaders that have grown even faster in their careers, that's the pattern I also see. It's looking for change, but purposeful change.
mm. And in your positions, I mean, working in these large corporations, companies, you worked in different countries as well, right? So how did you balance like local culture and like global vision at the same time?
So there's a few things that I hold myself accountable, which is when you are in a leadership position, whether you're leading a project as a project manager, or you're leading an initiative at a program level, or you lead an entire team, you have to have some principles and some way of doing 3 things I call simplify, clarify, and collaborate. So, how do I simplify everybody's life? Make sure they're clear on their mission, make sure that we simplify what we stand up for, and what is that we need to deliver based on results. Then clarify is clarifying what you're doing, why you're doing it, to the context of the person you are speaking with. So I may have a strategy that I'm pitching to my CIO, aka my manager. I want to clarify that to her context, right, as an executive. But if I'm pitching the same strategy to my execution team, I need to clarify in the context for their work, their scope, which is executing the strategy, what it means for them. And collaboration is promoting the collaboration to make sure everybody's aligned to what's that we're assigned to do. So there was a wonderful training that I received at West Point for an immersive day in the kind of army facility up in New York. And that also is one of those aha moments in your career where their mission is about a mission first, people always.
Mm,
And
mm,
as simple as it sounds, if you make it clear what the mission is and you make sure people are aligned to that mission, and you say, I got your back, the mission's ours, and the responsibility is ours to deliver this, but I got your back. So that to me has been a motto that I hold myself accountable for, and I try to pass it on to my team, being very transparent, very, very clear of how things are done. And to your question about how do you deal with people in different cultures,
mm.
is you also use an example earlier, you stepping in as the new guy into a new company that you don't know anybody, like I step into Royal or even at IBM. So I made those switches. I think the first and foremost is when you walk into a place, you got to listen to the music. You don't play the music. You got to listen to the music and understand what music is being played, how they dance to it, how they enjoy it before you make any
Mhm.
changes, before you make any suggestions, right? For Royal, for example, the first 90 days, I was just listening. I was acting, and I told everybody I'm going to act as a consultant. I'm purely going to just ask questions to understand how things are done here. So I think it's really important to cultures to understand how they operate. And there's nothing but experience to go and understand how is the business done in the UK versus in Manhattan, right?
True.
Which is different than Florida. Or how is it to work with Indian teams when we have developers working with you overnight? I've worked with teams in China, so you understand the culture. But I think in order to bring it all together, I always say, guys, no matter what culture, if there's one common language, is the mission. What is the mission? And then how is everybody equipped with the right tools? So I'm always asking the question, do you have everything you need to be successful to do what you need to do for this mission? So it's more of a way of me engaging and building relationships and make sure that we have a common language, just like soccer, which is a common language around the
Yeah.
world. To me, having a clear mission and focus on results, it's the best way of leading folks to deliver what they need to deliver.
I mean, when you talk about the word mission, bring it back to something you said a little bit earlier. You said something about giving back. Once you make it to a certain level, you want to give back, right? And I think that that's a part of a mission that a lot of us as first or second generation immigrants do have that mindset because whether our parents, our grandparents were some, we kind of saw it with them first, and now it's up to us now as leaders now. But what legacy are you hoping to leave behind for the next generation of immigrants that are looking to, get into the technical world, technology world? I'm sorry.
Well, for technology, I'm biased to say because I'm passionate. I say no matter what type of job you do today, you are leading with technology. You are using technology, whether you are a basic user or advanced user. You're gonna need to know technology. So my legacy, and I recently wrote a book, which next in Portuguese for the Brazilian market, and I'm looking to translate into English next year. My legacy is to put in action what I put in my book, what I do every day at work, which is uh, first of all, and some of the things we talked about, embracing change, um, being comfortable with the unknown, being able to understand problems and be excited about solving them. I think in the technology industry, you hear a lot of talks about here's my solution, and my solution is better than the guy next door. People get passionate about their solution. And what I say, you got to be passionate about the problem you need to solve. So I'm always preaching this, like, let's be clear before we understand our mission. Let's understand the problem we're trying to solve. And
Yep. Yep.
people don't give enough time and attention to those details. They're highly important. And I think overall, from a career progression, is it's own your career and design the career you want to have, and don't be shy about it. Right? Having the conversation with yourself and dream up. So anything is possible.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes down to like the legacy that you're trying to leave, obviously you said you have children as well, right? One,
Yes.
two.
Two kids, 10 and 12.
Okay, okay, you got your hands full right there.
Exactly.
Are they into soccer as well?
They're actually at soccer practice right now. They both play travel here in Florida.
You know, I had to ask that question. I had to ask that question.
Yeah, I'm one of those parents on the weekends watching the kids, right?
Okay, you know, as with me in dance, right? I would hope that my kids would dance when the time does come. But like, how has your fatherhood influenced your leadership?
Oh, I remember actually when my wife was pregnant to my first ones, this 2013. Um, I have just gotten promoted to a bigger role, so I was inheriting a bigger team, more responsibility. And then for me, it was like overwhelming, right? So you now have this child is being born, and they don't come with a manual, so I don't know how to be a father. And
They
they
don't
also
cover
didn't want to.
instructions. Yeah, right.
And then you go into that transition, like I feel like I'm a kid myself, and I'm having a kid, right? But to me, the maturity that came with fatherhood, and again, it goes back to now it's nothing about me. So the selfishness that I did for many years of thinking about me, investing in me, is what I'm gonna put towards my kids without spoiling them. So it's the balance of how much do I invest in them and protect them without spoiling them. So that's kind of the balance. But it
Hmm.
changed my thinking completely for the better. It was about the giving, it's about the, you know, no matter what, I have to serve my wife, I have to serve my kids now with two, and it's less about what you're doing for yourself, but at the same time you can't forget about yourself. So it's always that balance. And then to me, when it comes to leadership, when it comes to work-life balance, everything in life is a balance. Anything what I tell my kids, I say the exact words, I say anything in life that you do too much of, there's a problem. If you play too much video game, if you play too much soccer, if you drink too much water, whatever it is, always find balance. So I think successful people to me, I translate to people that can well balance personal, spiritual, family, finances, different aspects of your life with a balance. Because if you put too much effort on one side, you're giving something up on the other.
I see you. That obviously makes total sense right there. Balance is very hard to find, but when you do find it, a lot of things do happen. That it creates a lot more alignment. Uh, it creates more structure. You know, systematic approaches, healthy habits, in which you can live off of. You know, once you got a life full of chaos, left, right, up, down. You don't even know where the next day or the next paycheck is coming from. It causes that, but only a selective individual could see that moment in time in their lives, like how you did when you were in the restaurant business area. Like I need to stop this. We need to figure this out. And just from like the conversation that we're having here, like you're being very humble in regards to your journey. IBM, Royal Caribbean, GE, um, when
JetBlue.
JetBlue, when you were the leadership groups that you're a part of, like writing a book in Portuguese and now looking to translate it um, into English, like this is it goes to show you how strong-minded you were. You know, even at the age of 20, not really speaking the language as much, to be able to knock all of this out in this time frame. And we're not talking about a 70-year window from 20 to now, right? We're talking about a good amount of years of struggle, hardships, a lot of positive, light being shined on you. And it just goes to show you that anything is possible. When you mentioned the land of opportunity and talking about coming over here, like it just goes to show you, like with that limited amount of resources, you still were able to to get all of these wonderful and strong, powerful accolades, which is very impressive. Some
Thank you.
people
And
go
you
ahead.
said a key word right there, it's resource, right? And what I learned is, sometimes we limit ourselves because of what, well, only if I had more money, only if I had this, only if I had that. So we always, at the end of the day, is scarce with resources. We tell ourselves, I don't have the resources. But if you put in your mind that you are resourceful and you can build resources, when I look back at either my career professionally, my personal life, even writing a book, it was because I surround myself resources. For example, the crazy idea of writing a book, which is an idea I had for 10 years, I had pages and pages of scrapbooks and things that I took over for, or I wrote it down for over 10 years. I opened that box one day and I said, there's so much I could actually put together and share, and people that didn't have the privilege of receiving the training that I received at GE, and I would like to share with the world. Then I go to IBM and another 8 wonderful years in 3 different divisions. I'm like, only if I could tell those experiences. Then I bounced the idea through my now co-author and a good friend that I've had for 15 years. And I said, hey, what if we wrote a book together? How did that look like? And that's how ideas are born. And then we decided that instead of putting everything on us, let's find people that have written books. Let's get coaching. Let's figure out what the process is to write a book. And it took us 2 years to write it, from the idea to actually publishment. And then we had the launch party early this year in São Paulo in February. It was a wonderful experience because it was an accomplishment, but it was the history and then the stories that we have within ourselves to be able to now tell other people. And then by getting the small wins, we built confidence in ourselves that, hey, I didn't have resources to do the small thing, but I did it anyway. Then I can do something bigger and something bigger. And then you realize that being resourceful is really the key to success, the way you define success. And just last thing is, from a professional career standpoint, the resources that I've accumulated over the years are my mentors. And guess what? They're free most of the time. So
True,
it was
true.
me being proactive and the company promoting the opportunity to say, hey, I could go to the highest level in the organization and ask someone, can you be my mentor, when you build that relationship? So I'm a firmer believer and I'm a product of mentorship, to a point that you talk about giving back. When you feel that you now have so much to contribute and you have enough experience, then now I became, well, not now, but for years, I have become a mentor myself.
Mm-mm. That's that's a beautiful job, right? I know we have a lot of careers and titles, but just the one word mentor, right? That comes. That's like being a father, being a mother, right? You're really gonna shape the lives of so many other people in the many years to come, and they'll be honored to have you. And the amount of experience that you've had, I think, like you said, you can't be a chef unless you know how to cook. And that was clear as day. Like, you can't be a mentor unless you haven't gone through a couple of things in order to kind of help someone in their on their journey.
And the detail is, you never stop, right? I still have
Yeah,
5 mentors that I connect. Some of them are still the same. Some come later on. Some come and go. But yeah, to me is, we are humans, man, and we have a lot to share and teach each other. If you could only create the environment that when we can to have people to collaborate and share, I think we all rise. And that was actually the tagline for GE's leadership program, was about together we all rise.
yes, 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 yes. One of my good dear friends, he used to always say that all the
Yeah.
time. He worked in GE finance. Brings me to my last question, because we're talking about rising and uplifting the individuals. What would you have said to the 20-year-old back then on that flight, flying into the United States, right? Not knowing a lot, not knowing where they were going to go, where they're going to end up. What advice would you have given to the younger version of yourself, with the knowledge and the leadership that you have now?
It's a great question. Make me think. I'd say a few things. One is, fear will come. Fear is everywhere, right? If you read the news, if you look at the macroeconomy, if you listen to certain people, fear is everywhere, right? There's a great book called Outing with the Devil by Napoleon Hill. And they talk about how leaders Hitler being one, would lead through fear, right? This is a book that was hidden and it couldn't be published for 70 years, right? Because they were afraid of what's going to happen. And the reason I say this because fear is everywhere and fear comes to us. And I would say, Gustavo, when you see fear, when you feel it, don't listen to it. Everything will be all right. Trust, right? Trust whatever you define. I define as a Christian God. Whatever you define as your um, as a higher power. Trust, and um, and then always try to gain clarity. I think we need to seek clarity. Our lives are confusing. Humans are confusing, right? We have
I
complexity
agree.
everywhere. You go out to the internet, there's too much information, there's noise everywhere. So I would say to Gustavo, don't listen to the noise, or sometimes stop the noise, spend time with yourself and clarify, like simplify. And I think that would be, I would have removed a lot of self doubts that came many times. Um, Especially when you achieve something, you're like, hey, what was once a dream now is reality. Now what? Then you're kind of lost. What's next? Do I
Mm-hmm.
deserve this? So there's a lot of questioning, right? So um, sometimes our worst enemy is ourselves, and so I would focus and invest more early on, which I did later, in one thing called emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm. Well said, Gustavo. I feel like in this time period of us connecting, I feel like I've learned a lot more about the journey, and I know our listeners definitely have learned a lot about what to expect if embarking on something like this. You know, like you said, fear is real. You have to lead with the intentions of also giving back. You know, it's nothing. There might have been a little moment of doubt, but still how you work through the doubt and how you moved around. I'm very impressed by the movement around because some people would have been like moving around, especially when you're looking at a resume. People say that's a little bit too much when you're moving from one place to the next. They question what's going on. But you were saying, look, I'm moving because I need to find this information. You went looking for the answers every single day, every single week, and you're still searching for those answers. And it's led you to some wonderful positions and it's led you to where you are right now, Royal Caribbean. So again, Gustavo, I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart and from the whole Zaka community. Thank you for just being present on our podcast today and really just sharing your journey with us and being very vulnerable on our platform.
I really appreciate you guys. Thanks for the invite, and I love the work you guys are doing. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I want to let the listeners know if you want to hear more inspirational stories like Gustavo, please check us out on ZakaConnect.com. Follow our feed, Zaka Connect, and follow us at Zaka, wherever you listen to your podcast.